What does it mean to be authentic? Must one first understand what it means to be inauthentic? To identify exactly what feels disingenuous. And from those exact identifications, be able to extrapolate its opposite. It's my understanding that once something is birthed from nothing, its exact opposite is immediately birthed at the same time. Because what something is can be understood, can its opposite be understood? When we look at somebody who is kind, understanding what kindness is in thought and in action, we can more easily identify thus what it means to not be kind in thought and action, which equates to us understanding kindness, what kindness's opposite is. Vice versa, if I understand what to hate is in thought and action, is then to immediately understand, if even not to be able to put into words, still to be able to understand what the opposite of hate is in thought and action. Perhaps what it may look like, appear as, shift as. And in that way, is there really ever one birth of anything? Or is it always the birth of two things in one? The birth of what something is, and thus the birth of the opposite to what that thing is, creating essentially a duality that splits into two separate, completely separate things, existing in opposition of one another, but nonetheless their own separate births, their own separate beings, concepts, things. Duality seems to be something that is so easily, although oftentimes maybe complicated too, to be able to observe in almost every single thing, if not every single thing. And is our observation of that consistency of something what creates the notion in us as humans to be able to say, this is a law of the universe, simply because I myself and equally other people are able to observe this thing consistently, or this theory of something being concluded in various different ways, or people arriving to the same conclusion from various different ways, is that what allows us as humans to claim fact or truth to anything. And is truth even something that exists? In my wakings this morning, I wrote two different things, but equally they're connected. In my quest to understand myself, reveal myself as a fully fledged human and fully fledged soul, I have gone down a journey emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, full of mistakes, full of sufferings, traumas, abuses, misunderstandings, moments of clarity, moments of clairvoyance, moments of sanity and insanity, moments of rationalness and irrationality, in moments of pureness, moments of impurity. And what I've noticed is that the journey has been nothing but a swimming, but nonetheless still a flow, weaving in and out of the dualities of almost everything. There's so much left to be discovered. There's so much left to peel back and analyze. There's so much to step back and say, I will not analyze no more. There's so much to learn. There's so much to be taught. There's so much to teach. And then I come to the question, is it even my place? Nonetheless, the journey has been weaving in and out of the dualities of things. The dualities of myself, the dualities of emotion, the dualities of thought, the dualities of opinions, the dualities of being, of truth and illusion. Before I share the thoughts, which are really just questions, to understand the beginning of the first thought that I'm about to share, I found myself trying to work through specific experiences of my life that have equally confused me about myself, about other people, about the world, about God, yet also have equally revealed to me myself, other people, the world, God. One of those particular things has been narcissistic abuse. I will not unpack all of that here. That is something that I don't know if I'm ready to discuss that on such a public forum. I'm not sure if that even needs to be discussed on a public forum, as each of our journeys towards healing and discovery, in my personal opinion, are our very own to walk and to open or close ourselves to what we learn or can learn or may benefit from learning. I understand how my discoveries or my healing and me using my voice to discuss what I've been through and how I'm processing it and working through it can lend itself to people who may be going through the very same things, making them not feel alone and connected and help them in their healing. But in my philosophical understanding, or trying to understand of things and the bigger responsibility that each of us may have, I question if doing so, though with good intention, cannot as well lead to results that could not be good, in the sense that they could harm someone's growth by harming someone's understanding of their own self, which may not be or look like my very own experience. And that's a totally different conversation to be had about nuance of individual, nuance of opinion, nuance of experience of life. That's another philosophical discussion to be had. Returning back to what I was saying about the narcissistic abuse, the experience of gaslighting, being gaslit about yourself, about reality, about the world around you, about what's possible, what isn't, what's known, what isn't. That kind of confusion can feel and be so destabilizing that it can feel like experiencing exactly what insanity is. But insanity in a different form, whereas we understand insanity to be repeating the same thing over and over again and not changing. Insanity in the form I'm speaking of is being unable to ground yourself in anything, because the ground beneath you, what you know of yourself, what you know of others, what you know of the world, of God, etc., is consistently pulled from underneath your feet, and you're flying and being thrown around, desperately trying to grab onto things, but there's nothing to grab onto. It's all air. You're not hitting walls. You're not hitting anything but air. Desperately hoping that you will just hit the ground. No longer caring what that impact of hit and collision will actually do to you, because you're so desperate for grounding in any sense. It's a dangerous place to be or feel that you exist, because the collision can potentially be way worse or harmful to your development than the consistent pulling of the ground out from underneath your feet. Or they can equally be just as detrimental. going through so many forms of that type of abuse while trying to hang on to these core aspects of who I am that I've always known or understood even as I was a child, desperately holding them and burying them so deep that they no longer were deep inside any human consciousness that I have, but were deep into my very fabric of my soul, a place that no other being on earth could ever enter or touch upon. In a desperate attempt to preserve that which I am from everything and everyone around me, attempting to dismantle that, change that, affect that. It led me to many conversations with myself, counsel with God about, and equally with other people, about what is authenticity. And it made me understand how in these family dynamics of narcissistic abuse, how certain children who are not the scapegoated child can oftentimes, not all the time, just often or sometimes, go on to become exactly what the parents are. Of course, nuanced, because no soul on earth is the same or ever will be the same. Every soul, every existence is unique to its very own. But nonetheless, these children may go on to carry on the same mistakes or sins, as some people like to call them, of past generations, passed down by their parents. The lack of awareness of them, or perhaps the awareness of them, but the lack of work to improve upon them, thus leading to what we know of in today's language as generational trauma continuing, being passed down over and over again through the mistakes we've learned from our parents that have manifested in us in ways we don't recognize are exactly those things. The pain that they have caused in us, creating coping mechanisms, attachment styles, psychological maladaptive strategies that are exactly what lead us to behaving and thinking and operating in ways that return that pain to then their children. And that's how the cycle just continues. And I found myself asking why? Why might that be? Beyond what we already understand. And I realized, well, what do I know about my own experience as a scapegoated child working through that abuse to return to myself, understand those things in myself, maladaptive strategies, coping mechanisms, etc. So that way I may evolve into a version of myself that is authentic to who my soul is, the uniqueness of my soul. And what I discovered in turning that question onto myself was it's easier. It's easier to create a version of yourself. It's easier to say and do according to a concept that one may believe will project a certain ideal of themselves upon the world and upon others that will garner a very specific reaction towards them. And why would that be important? Because those reactions towards that idea self would be feeding the very parts of that wounded person that they did not receive in their childhood, perhaps, such as unconditional love for the very imperfect soul that you may be. I say that specifically because within narcissistic abuse, as a child in a family system, you are easily able to pick up messages from your caretakers that say, I am not unconditionally loved. If I am not perfect, I will not receive love. I must be perfect because I'm desperate for love. Because any child, it seems as though every child in their developing brain, which I relate to that of a computer downloading information, not yet ready to function and operate, be used out in the world for what it can offer. As it's developing, downloading information, it exists with what seems like an already ingrained understanding of a duality that seems to be innate, which is love and hate, fear, and whatever the true opposite of fear may be. I know that a lot of people philosophically, conceptually have different ideas of what they believe the opposite of fear is. I'm not going to share mine right now. You can fill in the blank for yourself. Nonetheless, there is that idea of I receive what maybe the child doesn't understand as love, or I don't receive love. However, the child may understand what love may be at that time, at that age. The impact of children who grow up in environments with caretakers who know themselves or have healed parts of themselves or had the tools to understand how to do that, why to do that, grow up to have a very grounded and stable sense of self, the world, which seems to allow for them, grant them, to show up in the world in wonderful ways that are examples of their authentic self. For those of us with more challenging childhoods because of challenging caretakers and the messages we may have received from them, if intentionally or not, the damage that has during that developmental stage, the way that I've understood it, at least for myself, is it's like having your very first true existential crisis, but at an age that you are just not at all capable of handling. at a young age like a child, are you really truly ready to handle such an extreme mental and emotional and spiritual challenge such as an existential crisis? There's so much more that's not even yet understood about life, about yourself, about your needs. You're still understanding what are even needs. It's almost like having an existential without knowing you're having one, or without even understanding the concept of one, where the child is having this understanding or misunderstanding of their parents' behaviors and actions towards them, thinking, well, my parent is ignoring me. I must not be lovable. Oh wait, but they're giving me attention right now. Okay, so maybe I am lovable. Oh wait, they're beating me. Maybe I really am bad. I mean, why else would they be doing this? Like, the child doesn't have the full mental capacity to be able to fully understand what is happening to them, within them and without them. Nor are they able to fully understand other people, the intentions of other people, the motivations of other people, the complications and intricacies of life, and how that can affect people psychologically and emotionally. Nor do they understand the full spectrum of emotions and the ways that they can appear, be expressed, projected. They're coming to all these major conclusions, and most likely not even consciously, and at a time when they're developing. So those conclusions, unchallenged, because they're not even known to the child fully, maybe on a conscious level, are then just being literally programmed into them. Because that's what being a child is developing. You're downloading information. You are literally programming your operating system, your mind, your body. This existential type of crisis is obliterating to the psyche of a developing child. And it is my personal theory that this existential crisis, perhaps it should have its own term or name, or should be looked at to see if it's even something going on, at least for my own personal experience, seems like that's what may have happened for me. Where, as a child, I felt forced into a position to understand things I wasn't yet ready to understand because I didn't have the full knowledge to understand them. And I'm forcing my brain to grow faster and bigger at a time when it's not able or ready to, because I may have felt so desperate at that young age to make sense of such pain that I was feeling or interpreting of the things around me or happening to me. I think the damage that does to a developing psyche is what presents itself or manifests itself in adulthood as very wounded people. And perhaps the greater that existential explosion or implosion, really, that cannot be handled by the child's brain, it's not ready to, that implosion perhaps causes cracks in the psyche. Creates unhealthy programming that then makes the adult life of that child spent less living and more striving to figure out what's going on, why are things not working. And if that child is perhaps in a position to discover or be offered resources, such as things like therapy, to help, put the pieces together to understand, then the reprogramming of these unhealthy things out of them and the replacement of better programs, which is a whole re-downloading experience, so much of that adult life is less lived because it's spent having to re-experience, in a way, the developmental stage of a childhood that it did not get. And it's really a shame, because some people don't even survive that. Some people do end up, unfortunately, taking matters into their own hands. Returning back to connect this to what I was talking about, with all of that understood, or trying to be understood, it made me wonder, well then, maybe that's why it's so easy to just become your parents. The passed down trauma of your parents in your own way. Maybe that's why it's easier to create a grandiose idea of yourself rather than looking to find out who you really are and being that. Because a grandiose idea, like most narcissists do, is as simple as just picking how you want to be perceived, picking how you want to look, picking how you want to be understood. It's absolute control. Every damaged child has an aspect of that in a way or another, needing a sense of control. Because it was the very chaos of their childhood and the people around them that resulted in this fragmented experience of life and of themselves and of reality. So to just pick how you want people to view you, to pick how you want people to think of you, is so much easier. And then to mold yourself to appear like that is an easier quest. It's not to say that it's easy. I mean, still doing that and forcing yourself to abide by these things that maybe you're not really is still its own difficulty, because it's an act you have to keep up every single day, which is why the mask of many narcissists slip all the time. It's not feasible, not in the long run. And then when you have people like me who are very hypervigilant because of our childhood, we are able in a lot of ways to catch those small micro slips or those micro expressions as well as the macro. And that's not always a gift, as much as it may sound like it. Being hyper-vigilant or hyper-attuned is a double-edged sword in many ways. Just ask anybody who has that ability, because it seems like that ability comes from trauma, and I can't imagine why anybody would actually want trauma just to attain an ability that they may believe is powerful or good or cool. It's not, at least for myself. It can be helpful because it is still an ability that can protect me, but that's exactly what that ability is. That's the existence or the fine-tuning of such an ability was to literally protect myself, as anybody from childhood trauma will understand if they've developed hypervigilance. It was to survive their environment. I have to pay attention to every micro expression, every macro expression. I have to predict the behavior and the moods and the possible thoughts and feelings and opinions of everybody around me and their energy in order to protect myself from the unpredictable, from the physical abuse, from the mental abuse, from the harm, from the damage. It was a survival mechanism, a very powerful one, in fact, which is why, even though many of us with trauma are suffering to overcome that trauma, it's part of the reason why many of us who survived trauma, why we survived it. But not everybody does. And we have to lay our respect down and our honor down for those people who were doing their best with everything that they did have and did know at the time. But it made me understand a lot better that it's much easier than to choose the path that I chose. I didn't always choose it. It wasn't until my 30s. And age is irrelevant to this anyway. When I finally had a better understanding of what was going on, the choice to choose healthiness, to choose health, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, I only understood what I was wanting, which was to heal, which was to be aligned with my true authentic self and expressing that and showing up in the world as that. I only knew that objective. I didn't quite understand, and how could any of us, what challenges or how difficult that journey was actually going to be. And it is mountainous. It's like climbing a huge mountain, climbing back down it, only to climb up a whole other one. And then at the top of that mountain, looking out and noticing that there's maybe 4,000 other mountains to go. And they're all just as high, if not higher, than the last. And then in between walking from the bottom of one to the start of another is hills and peaks and cracks and crevices and forests and beasts and monsters and just a plethora of things to overcome. It is really not the journey for the weak. And I don't even like to say that, because I don't even like to think that there is a such thing as a weak person. Perhaps ignorant, and not ignorant in the sense of a bigot, maybe ignorant, but ignorant in the sense of perhaps just not understanding or being aware or being exposed to the knowledge to be aware of what is happening to them, in them, what's happening around them, for them to even understand that there's a journey to be had, perhaps. I digress. This journey has been ongoing existential crises. And it's okay. I've had existential crises my entire life, from childhood, in my teens, in my young adult college years, in my adult life. I've always had existential crises, and the one thing I've learned about myself through them is that I've always survived them, no matter how hard they were, no matter how much to others outside me it looked like I may not survive them. I always knew my strength. It's what I would call the phoenix within me. which I think I held on in my own ways at a young age. Not to be grandiose about myself, but to allow myself permission of strength that at the time I didn't believe I had. Because I had at least enough awareness that I was in what felt like an unsurvivable situation. So it was really just a tool for strength, as much as it was what led me to understanding more truth about myself. That it's not so much a phoenix, it's more the inspiration of what the mythology of a phoenix represented to me, and what I noticed within myself, which was this ongoing ability to survive death after death internally. And at one point in 2018, physically. I think of people who are going on to be just like their narcissistic parents, perhaps. And then I think of the journey I've been on, and understanding that the journey I'm on is, although in some ways may be similar for other people who are on that same journey, nonetheless is nuanced. None of us are ever on the same journey, period. We really need to stop projecting that on each other, which is understandable. We only know our experience. That's where we need to humble our ego and put it aside sometimes to realize, like, I can only understand that which I know, which is me. So in order to understand that which is not me, I must listen. Doesn't mean agree, means listen, understand. Maybe understand that it's not always about something needing to be agreed to, or agreed with, or disagreed with, but that there is something we can learn from every single one of us. Something, absolutely. Absolutely. I've been resistant to that belief for so long because my experiences have caused me to not trust humans, like, at all. And yet as I heal day by day and recover from things and get in touch more and more with my authentic self and expressing that, it becomes all the more apparent that there's so much to learn from one another. Now, whether we need to learn from one another or not is a whole other philosophical discussion. But anyway, connecting all of that back to my original thing about wanting to share questions, these thoughts that I wrote down, all of that led me to the discovery of the manifestation community, or the manifestation principle and concept. And I tried to open my mind to practicing that for a little bit, just to see the possibility of this. And I tried to do so within the framework and understanding and connection with God, my belief, and that's not a nebulous term for Satan. I'm talking about God, the very God that's responsible for creating myself, perhaps you, all of what is around this entire creation of existence, whatever that may be. And I noticed moments of resistance, moments of an aversion inside me pushing against my attempts to manifest. And, according to the manifestation stuff, I believed this is perhaps negative thinking, or this is perhaps my doubts, my limitations getting in the way. And so I went down more of that journey. I read The Power of Positive Thinking. I read so many books, in fact, and I didn't just digest what knowledge of these writers was being shared with me or provided to me. I let it marinate, and I stepped back or journaled to ask myself, what do I think of what I just learned? What is this information, in fact? How do I feel about it? Do I agree with this? Does it make sense to me? Or am I trying to force it to make sense of me because some deeper longing or deeper issue? And I just asked question after question, and asked a question to those questions and a question to those, and just tried to get so deep until there were no questions to be had, which anyone that philosophizes will understand that it's likely that you may never get to no more questions. There's always, I can't say always as if I'm arrogant to assume that I know that something can be claimed to always be a certain way, but it seems that time and time again, at least from my own experience, that there's a question somewhere, and that I haven't just gotten to a last question the deeper I go with my questions. They just keep happening. They keep happening. It's kind of what insanity is. It's like being a philosopher is kind of like living comfortably in insanity. It's kind of what it feels like for me, and what I observe in other people who do philosophize or have philosophized in the past. Great questions as they may ask, great conclusions they may arrive at. Anyone that studies philosophy can observe for themselves that there's always another philosopher that counters the conclusions that another philosopher may have come to, which then to me presents the bigger picture of reality that we just don't know shit. Yeah. So anyway, so with the I had this thought now. This brings me to finally where I was going with this. A roadblock to manifesting for me is the telling a lie until it becomes true. What I'm referring to there, real quick for clarification, is a concept you may be familiar with in the manifestation world, as well as those who do it without knowing they're doing it. It's the fake it till you make it. Let's say my goal was to be wealthy, saying to yourself with affirmations and stuff like that, I'm wealthy, I'm rich. Telling and believing this lie until it becomes an actual truth in your reality. That's what I'm referring to here. So a roadblock to manifesting for me is the telling a lie until it becomes true. I seem to have a deep aversion to the concept of lying. Now, this is not to imply that I don't lie. I've lied many times in my life. I still have moments where I do lie, and I work to catch them, and I work to correct them, and I work to make amends. Because I'm human. I have a deep aversion to the concept of lying. It's tangled in deception, and deception of any kind can feel bad and wrong to me. Perhaps that's because the root is narcissistic family abuse, and growing up in a city that surrounded me with inauthentic expressions, with masks upon masks, and deceptions of self used to manipulate not only myself, but many others around. This caused deep pain, and in good conscience, I cannot allow myself to inflict this level of pain on others now that I am aware. By engaging in authentic expression of my own, presenting with a mask, and using tools of deception to conjure what I long to fulfill. Is there then another way, perhaps unique to what my brain needs, to manifest what I long to fulfill that still honors my values of honesty, authenticity, and transparency? I go on to say, is it a lie to say I will win a Grammy for my first album at a time when I am seemingly nowhere near that possibility? Or is it a foretelling of a future event in the making? Is it a prediction I'd like to come true? Asking those questions, because that was one of the things I was working to manifest, because my true heart of the gifts that God gave me, the way that I feel I can show up in the world to express is through art, through this book I just wrote that I'm still making edits to, and to making music. And instead of just creating to just create, struggling in my life financially and struggling to provide for myself and take care of myself has led me to thinking perhaps it's okay to create and then also attempt to make a living off of that, so that way I can authentically be myself, as myself, creating and doing in the only way that I know is true to myself, and still be able to take care of myself, being practical in life, so I can shelter and feed not just myself but my loved ones. I realize that with this question, am I seemingly is it a lie at a time when I'm seemingly nowhere near that possibility, or is it a foretelling of a future event in the making? Made me realize, well, what really are those two things I'm asking? They're just perspectives. I can ask that question from the perspective of it being a lie, and here's what would make it a lie. Yet I can also ask it from the perspective of, is it a lie if it's really something that's in the making, or something that you're fighting for? They're different perspectives. So my biggest question is, regardless of the perspective, is this still deception? And is that okay? Is that good? Is that healthy? Even if it has what seems like a positive outcome, or at least a positive conclusion for oneself. I went on to then say, or ask really, is the absence of its truth what makes it a lie? Or does it just feel like a lie because of its present absence? Am I understanding truth to be subject to a single point in time, such as the present? Can truth only be found in the present? Is truth as quick as the act itself, the present act, and thus gone as quickly as that act moves from immediacy into no longer existing, aka moving from present, immediate, to past? What about the past? Can truth not be found there too? Or is the absence of the present what makes the truth that once was no longer as possible to find? Is the search for truth, then, the very thing we are not able to control and must therefore let go control of? Meaning is the belief that truth can be found in anything and anyone and anywhere, if you look hard to find it, a reluctance to surrender to that which we may never come to know? Is the search for truth a full man's errand? Is the search for truth a suffering man's desperate need for control over an existence he has no control over? Is it true I have no control at all over it? How does one surrender to such a notion when the very root of their suffering is in the trauma in never knowing and the abuse of being gaslit about one's reality and oneself? When Jesus says, "Look and you'll find truth," what does that truly mean in a world that seems to offer no such thing? When you deconstruct every concept, every equation, every finding, every belief deeper and deeper and deeper until its very birth from nothingness, what I observe is that the only truth is God, the very thing responsible for the creation of everything. And in that creation, the creation of us, whose every answer to anything has just been a declaration of truth defined by the parameters, limitations, and understandings of that mind trying to find truth in the understanding of the creation, this very creation. Are any of us even qualified for such declarations as we have made in science, in math, in the esoteric or spiritual, in psychology, in philosophy, in biology, in practically anything? Is part of the illusion or the insanity caused by living within illusion that we truly believe there are facts to be found in illusion by our own human intellects? Is it not quite comical to God that I sit here now, racking my brain to still make sense of all that is not logical to me and all that I am not possibly capable or qualified to make sense of? For if God birthed this from nothing, but more importantly, that God birthed this, why would I, or any other human for that matter, who was created by such God, be able to understand it? Would that not imply sameness of intellect or power to God? To understand that which God has created? I'm not God. I'm not God. None of us are God. I am not so powerful as to birth from nothingness, nor have the intellect to be superior to that of God who has birthed me, who has birthed you, and all of this from nothingness. Nor do I have the intellect and the abilities to be equal to that of God. This is not to imply inferiority. I aim to destroy the very pendulum of human concept that there is hierarchy and an evaluation system of superior or inferior, and not bring that or base that in whatever God may actually be and my relationship with God. I am simply just. I am. That is all. Nothing more, nothing less, and with no such thing as to even be more or to be less, but rather just simply am. I am. I am. I am. I am. I am. What more can be said or be concluded? This is the most humbling of self I am able to come to, the most of all that is, of what I seem to be, was, and are. Language cannot indicate it. Language cannot truly describe it. Try as I may, this video for example, as we all may, but deeper and deeper and deeper I go, this is always what I get to. I am, I am, I am, I am, I am, I am. I flip that and turn it around to may I. God, I am, may I. May I be who and what I am, God. That's one thought. So separate from that, when people say your thoughts are important, you should share them with the world, or you have a great mind, share it with the world, right? If you've ever heard things like that from people around you, it made me think, what is a great mind to the people of this world and to the good that that mind could think to do, if in a system of existence that this mind is not able to determine or comprehend enough to meet its great potential. Without understanding the existence of which that great mind exists, what possible benefit could that great mind provide that no other mind could come to on its own? Is a great mind no more than an overfilled mind spilling thoughts into the minds of others where room exists to be filled? Does that then not show evidence no mind here is greater than any other? Are all minds not working the same, as in to seek truth in all that is not understood, so that it may be understood? And if understanding is reached, if even achievable, what for then? What will these answers we desperately need to know provide us? How might they change us? Is the point of existing to not actually know, to just be? But if to just be, how so? How so when there are claims of the afterlife that seem to make it so imperative to be in such specific ways as to achieve the answers to everything, as if to become God in a way by reward of God's knowledge, which are exactly these answers that we seek through the journey of truth? And is that what heaven is? Becoming God by returning back into God, which created us? And that knowledge a direct result of that integration, not because we are God or are actually becoming God, but because we belong to God and thus return back as part of God, which is thus the becoming that I am referring to here. In that line of questioning is the true Satan of earth, how we confuse one another with our attempts at finding truth, the belief that we can even do so. Is that really the deception of Satan that we were warned of? Which is not even Satan, but the concept that Satan exists as, through perhaps Jesus speaking not literally, but in analogy, symbolism, metaphor, things humans understand when presented with things they cannot understand. And the concept of Satan is such pride in the self that we stop being and we start reaching to become that which we never will, God. In the sense that we stop being, all that is and all that we were given and offered is less recognized, less appreciated, and the reaching is the wanting of more and more and more and more. More for what reason? I reached to make an album, but if I was a caveman of old times, would this urge to make an album even have existed in me? Perhaps a different urge would have. And if a different urge existed in me, this is me going off what I wrote now, and if a different urge even existed in me, would that be more who I am then? Or is what I am reaching for now more of who I am? When I think like that, it makes me think that our desires really do not define who we are. Going back to what I said, I reached to make an album, but if I was a caveman of old times, would this urge to make an album even have existed in me? Is this then a true need that must be met and reached in order to reach fulfillment? Or is the reaching what pulls me away from the fulfillment that already exists within me, that God has already provided me? So as we attempt to find truth and share our findings with one another, does that not continue the seeds of confusion within us? As we tell ourselves we are grounded, do we not then somehow find ourselves right back in the headspace of doubt or needing more? And why is that needing more never enough to convince us that what we are reaching for may not offer us such fulfillment after all? We're reaching outside ourselves, telling ourselves that that is ourselves or part of something that is within ourselves. But is it? Is that not what temptation is? The consistent desiring and the feeding of those desires, forgetting the deepest reason behind our longing to fulfill what we desire, which is filling of a void within us? Is that void not the absence of God and recognizing our pride leading us away from what only God can fill within us? Is there even a void at all? Or just a space we created by completely ignoring that which we all have is enough? And our free will is what we do with all we have. Confusion seems to be what creates chaos, one amongst many other things that do. And as our confusion expands and expands with every ounce of some other's knowledge we fill our heads with, that causes our head to twist and turn, to consider then abandon, to make sense of then make nonsense of, it explodes, it implodes the consciousness God gave us, resulting in absolute insanity. Insanity of self, insanity of reason, insanity of purpose, insanity of intention, of God. Our free will, freely willful, as in its very definition, willful, having or showing a stubborn and determined intention to do as one wants, regardless of the consequences or effects. Us humans, freely determined to do as we want, regardless of the consequence it has on others, and equally on ourselves. Too stubborn to see it, too irrational to rationally catch it, too absent of God to believe it. When I talk about God here, we all have our own belief in what that is for each of us. We all come from different faiths. These questions, this journey that I'm on, of my own moral existentialism, I've been on this for a very long time. This is not the first time. It's just the first time I'm speaking about it publicly rather than to just people close to me. I bring that preface up to just let you know, whatever you believe in, this video is not in any way, shape, or form to cause you to question your own faith. If there's any message I want you to take away from this, it's don't listen to me. Don't listen to me. Listen to you. However you take away from what I share, listen to you. In fact, I don't even need your comments. I may not even read them because it doesn't matter. At the very end of the day, after all of the knowledge in that day that you have taken within from various sources such as videos like this or books or etc., you will be left with just yourself, marinating in all of that. And you can either apply it and believe it, or you can then question it all for yourself. But just know, whatever conclusions you may come to, do not let your ego fool you to think that those conclusions are facts, are reality. I've spent my entire life searching for truth. And consistently, no matter how many people I talk to, how many people's perspectives and opinions and nuanced lives are revealed to me through stories, through the people themselves in person, online, people sharing things, in videos, in books, no matter the knowledge and where it comes from. None of that and none of them are me. Just like none of that or me is you. We'll always have to just be by ourselves with our thoughts, because nobody can come into our head or our heart or our soul, which I understand to mean think for yourself. It's okay to go outside of yourself here and there to take in knowledge, but to me it seems dangerous to take in all knowledge or all the knowledge you do come across if you're trying to then just apply it rather than take it in to question it, to question what your true, authentic self feels about it, and then to make peace with that, because that's you. Only you will ever exist within you. So what's it matter what I think or that person thinks? What's it matter? Which is another philosophical question, another big discussion to have. What does it matter? Does it matter? Does it not matter? Believe what you believe. I wouldn't want anything else for you. I actually don't even know you. At this point, I'm just in my room talking to myself. And I guess I'm putting this out there because a lot of what I'm sharing right now is just questions. No matter what faith you believe, or if you believe in none, no matter what you understand of God, even if you don't believe in the the words of different uh, Bibles and religions and their concepts of God, their myths and stories, or truths, as they may feel about them. No matter what all of that is for other people or for yourself, I hope that where I talk about God, just apply your own to that. Just apply your own to that. Where I talked about Satan, just apply your own to that. If you don't believe in that or believe in something different to that, that's okay. I'm not here to challenge that. I'm really not here to challenge that. I don't really care to challenge that because it's not my business. What you believe and what works for you, that's your business. Because you exist within you and you have to live with that. I have to live with myself. So what I believe in and what I feel resonates with me, that's what's important for me. I'm biting my lip because I'm like, my lips keep getting dry. I think I need to drink some water right now, but anyway, I don't know why I wanted to share this. I have ideas of why, which then have made me think like I don't need to share this. And going off my one question, is it the taking in of everybody else's knowledge in their search to make sense of what the truth is? Is that just causing more confusion about what the truth of this may actually be? And if we can even ever find that, if it even exists here, or is even possible for our human brain to understand. It's like then that question, I'm like, well, then why am I making this video? Why am I putting this out there? Why do I want people to listen to this? Do I even want people to listen to this? Or is this just like a video journal? But then if I make this public, yeah, just the never-ending questions. And it's like I can ask myself to death. And that stops me from taking so much action. Not because I'm not brave to. I've done some very brave things in my life. So I don't think courage or lack of courage is really an issue with me. I think it's more the desire to know, because of my experiences, not knowing, and how that's caused so much suffering and confusion. As well as equally the humbling of my ego, making sure I'm not committing the same sins of other humans that I notice, the arrogance of this, of stamping this is truth, this is fact on anything. Because I'm trying to humble my mind and ask myself, is it even possible for me or any other human mind to comprehend and come to factual, very truthful understandings of this incredible creation that I really, personally, I can't make sense of. Try as I may, try as I have my entire life, I've written so many theories, and I can make videos of all the different theories, but then I'm afraid that would just cause confusion or cause people to jump to new beliefs that may guide them away from God, and that's not my intention. My intention of sharing any of my thoughts are just to, I guess, just talk out loud to make sense of my own thoughts. Perhaps maybe to connect with other people who have their own thoughts as well. And when I say connect with people like that, I don't mean people who agree with me. In fact, I don't even think there's necessarily anything here to be agreed with if there's nuance to all of our situations and ways of understanding everything. More specifically, from my belief that there may not be any truth to be found here, or to at least be understood by our brain or my brain. No matter how confident and sure any of us ever are about any of the things we've come to in any field. But take this all with a grain of salt, because I will continue to think of these things as well as many other things. I will continue to intellectualize and philosophize. I will continue to ask questions and then not ask questions. I will continue to be and then not be. I will continue to exist and stop existing. I will continue to think this way and then think a different way as I am trying to evolve and grow and understand more and more, or to humble my own ego and brain to there's nothing I can actually understand that's not just my own conclusion that I'm coming to, based on other people's conclusions that they came to, etc., etc. Basically, what you're witnessing right now, I guess, is just someone in their development. I mean, isn't that all our videos after all? Any video we ever put out there, just the witnessing of someone in their current stage, in their current place of development. I know that I'm consistently growing. I'm consistently attempting to improve upon myself day by day, literally day by day. Which makes me think that, as you see me day by day, there'll be micro changes, micro transformations that, for those that do not follow me in life, will look like macro transformations possibly each year, perhaps, when they're really not. They're just the looking at something from a different angle. Some get to see me up close from all angles, and so my micro transformations might be easier to notice. The macro transformations a lot less able to notice, being so close to the picture. And then for people that don't know me, the macro expressions are exactly what's obvious. Stepping back from a painting you're not looking at consistently, and then you return to after a year, you're most likely going to notice every change of that photo, if even on an intuitive level. And it will look like it completely changed when it's not that it changed as much as it was never not changing, because it was growing. You look at a plant growing, is not every inch of that growth slightly different? Which could be said that it's changed. And in a way, it's like, yeah, it has changed. But it hasn't just gone from this and then was just like, nope, I'm this. It's grown into it. And there's a whole journey. There's pages and pages and pages of challenges and difficulties and sufferings and changed opinions and perspectives and mistakes and victories. There's just everything. There's thousands upon thousands of versions of you. It's actually something I wrote about in my book. I think I read a bit of that chapter actually in another video on my channel. Now that I think about it. But that's all it is. It's just like thousands and thousands of versions of yourself in development. It's all the more reason why we have to give grace to each other. We know not what we each carry. And we seem to want to be treated a certain way and then struggle to treat others the same ways we are demanding or asking or pleading to be treated. When will we learn the lesson? It's okay to make mistakes with that lesson, though, because no one's perfect. We're going to get it wrong from time to time. That's okay. What are you doing about it? That's where a character is defined. And if you're perhaps in a phase where you're not doing much about it, perhaps that is just a phase that you will come out of and start doing something about it. And in that case, grace is necessary. Or maybe it's not. Or maybe it's not a phase, but an act of rebellion, an act of clinging to our ignorance to stay unaware, because perhaps that journey seems too foreboding, too difficult. And well, if there's anything I can tell you at least about my own journey is, yeah, it is. It is. It's no journey of learning your worth and reprogramming yourself in connection with who you are, not according to other people, is a very difficult journey. And it's never stopped being difficult. Is it worth it? Oh my gosh, absolutely. Absolutely. I can't speak for everybody, so I solely speak for myself. This journey I'm on, absolutely, because the moments of clarity, of authenticity, is like my inner child and all the millions of different versions of myself coming together in one extremely big hug that is really just a hugging of them until they fully integrate into exactly what I am in the present moment. And that just continues day by day. That's the challenge, to stay connected with myself and to hug yesterday's version into today's version and keep that going, to keep that growing. But it's not always possible, because I'm not God. I'm not all powerful and all figured out, and I'm not all of that, I never will be. I'm just what I am. I am. That's it. I am. If there was a name for me, it's I am. It's not really Phoenix. It's not really Little Billy and Will and William. It's not all of those other names I've ever been given. Even the insulting ones. It's I am. I just am. I am.